Approximately 1,000 years before the reign of Emperor Palpatine, the Republic and the Jedi found themselves embattled with an altogether different incarnation of the Sith. Allied by the charismatic Lord Khan, the leadership of the Sith Order had been galvanized into a new ruling body, known as the Brotherhood of Darkness. In response, the Jedi General, styling himself Lord Hoth, formed the Army of Light, a controversial move which polarized the various leaders of the Jedi Order. While some were quick to follow Lord Hoth into battle, many others refused, believing the old general to have abandoned the true calling of the Jedi. However, they were still willing to listen to his closest advisors and comrades in the fight against the Sith, the Jedi Masters Pernacar and Valenthyne Farfalla. Valenthyne Farfalla had inherited the mantle of Jedi Lord from his father, and while he was skilled in politics, he was also possessed of a peculiar flamboyant manner and seemingly inappropriate obsessions with perfumes, elaborate fashion, and embellished speech. These strange tendencies of his often brought him into conflict with the obstinate and pugnacious Lord Hoth, who saw Farfalla as something of a foppish pretender. Despite this, Farfalla remained one of the longest-serving and dedicated of Hoth's companions, and while the two did not get along, Farfalla was responsible for raising a last great host of 300 Jedi Knights during Hoth's darkest hour, the Sith-imposed blockade of the planet Ruusan. This action would have still been in vain, as the Jedi had no way of landing their forces so long as the Sith blockade remained in place. Fortunately for them, the Brotherhood was betrayed by one of their own. The aptly named Darth Bane secretly ordered the Sith fleet to engage Farfalla's forces, giving the Jedi the opening they needed to land on Ruusan, though Farfalla arrived too late to save Hoth's greatest friend, Pernacar. While this initially aroused even greater tensions between the two leaders than had existed previously, the Jedi Lords eventually set aside their differences in time to deal with one final threat from the Sith. The polarizing and rebellious young Sith Lord Darth Bane managed to convince the now mentally unstable Lord Khan to employ a dark side ritual of devastating power, the Thought Bomb, a force which once unleashed would kill every Force sensitive within proximity to the blast. It was Darth Bane's goal to wipe out the remaining Sith, as he had adopted the belief that for the Sith Order to thrive, no more than two should ever exist at one time. The Twi'lek Sith Lord, Kopej, learned of Khan's madness and took to the battlefield, wishing to die as a warrior and not as one of Khan's foolish thralls. Promising to reveal Khan's plans to the Jedi in return for a fight to the death, Lord Kopej was granted his final wish by Farfalla himself. Farfalla brought the information to his general, and Hoth, realizing he could not allow Khan the chance of escape, resolved to engage the Sith forces. Either the Sith would back down, or they would at least be forced to detonate the weapon on sparsely populated Ruusan. Hoth made his last stand with a small contingent of knights and masters. In the general's absence, Valenthyne Farfalla assumed direct command of the remaining Republic forces and began the process of evacuation to protect the Jedi in his charge from the Thought Bomb, which Lord Khan unleashed shortly thereafter. For the following 10 years, Valenthyne Farfalla worked alongside Hoth's former Padawan, Jehu Nothon, to help the Galactic Republic rebuild following the brutal end of the war, all the while believing the Sith had been entirely eradicated from the galaxy. Nothon himself was never completely satisfied that the Sith were truly gone, and through a convoluted chain of events, learned of Darth Bane's survival. After gathering a small but elite force of fellow Jedi, Farfalla traveled to the planet Tython in hopes of capturing the Sith. Unfortunately, the combined might of Darth Bane and his apprentice Darth Zana proved to be too much for the Jedi, Valenthyne Farfalla was killed by Darth Bane personally, his efforts and the deaths of his fellows covered up by a hastily contrived though effective ruse orchestrated by Darth Zana, a ploy which left the Jedi Order unaware of the Sith Order's existence for nearly 1,000 years. "130 years after the Battle of Yavin, Darth Nihl, an Imperial Fist, or military commander, serving the Dreadlord of the One Sith regime, Darth Krayt, spearheaded an assault on the Jedi Praxium located on the planet Ossus. During the attack, Darth Nihl dealt a fatal blow to the Jedi Master Cole Skywalker, earning himself a position of high status amongst the One Sith as Darth Krayt's personal hand. Darth Nihl began life on his species' homeworld of Nagi as a warlord before coming to the attention of Darth Krayt, who recruited him into the Sith ranks. Unlike the vast majority of his contemporaries, Darth Nihl was not born a Sith. While this functioned to his detriment, as he was often looked over by his master in favor of beings like Darth Talon who were born into the Order, it was also one of the qualities that caused Darth Nihl to stand out amongst the Sith of his day. Due to the fact that Nyall knew what it felt like to be the master of his fate, and had fought previously for his own glory rather than that of his master's, he retained an ambitious streak throughout his years of service to Darth Krayt. Over the course of the war, Nyall's duties would bring him into conflict with his rival, Darth Talon, as well as Cade Skywalker, the son of Cole. Following Darth Krayt's final defeat at the hands of the young Skywalker, Nyall took command of what remained of the Sith forces and ordered his followers back into hiding, where they would await the chance to once again strike from the shadows. Hey guys, Matt here. Welcome to the next installment of the Versus series here on Grey Jedi 91. I thought I would start by explaining the reason for this somewhat odd matchup. You see, each of these military commanders possessed elements to their stories that left me with a dismissive attitude where they were concerned after my initial readings of their stories. In Farfalla's case, I simply had a difficult time accepting his role within the Jedi Order, along with his flamboyant manner and his gaudy starship, the Fairwind. That was an absolute embarrassment. The kind of thing that makes me understand why some fans treated the EU with skepticism and misgiving. In Nyall's case, the character simply never lived up to my expectations for where his story would go, as his ambition never really brought him to the forefront of events. Though he had the potential to do so, he was easily one of the more interesting characters on the Sith side. Various comments from my previous analysis featuring Darth Nihl prompted me to re-examine the character, and upon rereading Darth Bane Path of Destruction, Rule of Two, and the Jedi vs. Sith comics, which helped form the basis for that story, I also gained a higher opinion of Valenthyne Farfalla, at least where his skill set was concerned, though his bizarre personality and absurd starship still baffle me. So the task was simple. I decided to take a closer, more objective look at two figures I had previously underestimated and pit them in a confrontation together to see who would come out ahead. With that said, I present for you Valenthyne Farfalla versus Darth Nihl. We'll start with an examination of their physical attributes. Valenthyne Farfalla's species was initially very difficult to pin down and has been a point of contention throughout the years since the publication of his debut appearance. Despite this, he was apparently a half-Bothan, a hybrid species native to the world with which Farfalla shared his name. Half-Bothans were distinguished by their furry haunches which terminated in hooves, ruby red eyes, and in some cases tails and cranial horns. It isn't actually established exactly which of the humanoid races that Farfalla in particular is crossed with, and so establishing whether or not he has any inborn genetic advantages or disadvantages that set him apart from members of the human species is somewhat difficult. Suffice it to say that much like Darth Nihl, Farfalla is fairly young and in excellent physical condition given his Jedi training. Beyond that, little more can be said with certainty. A species native to the world Nagi, located within the unknown regions, the Nagai were a race of slender humanoids with translucently pale skin, jet black hair, gray eyes, and angular features. During Cade Skywalker's escape from the Sith temple on Coruscant with the aid of his mother, Nyall suffered the loss of his arm during a fierce lightsaber duel. In a fit of rage, Darth Krayt ordered Darth Melody to refit Darth Nihl with the arm of a Yuuzhan Vong creature rather than his own severed arm, a punishment for his failure. However, Darth Nihil's performance in battle did not appear to be greatly hampered by this. While both possess alien physiology, not enough is known about either species to say whether one possesses any distinct advantages or disadvantages over the other. Both appear to be relatively close to their physical prime, and neither has any crippling weaknesses nor any lasting injuries to take into account, nor indeed any environmental adaptations that would influence the proceedings of a duel in any appreciable way. No edge shall be awarded for physical attributes or enhancements. A celebrated war hero and one of the most ardent supporters of General Hoth's cause, Valenthyne Farfalla was a highly experienced duelist with plenty of frontlines combat experience and at least one high-profile combat kill to his credit. Equipped with a standard single-bladed lightsaber of nondescript make beyond its golden blade, Valenthyne Farfalla was recognized by his enemies as a force to be reckoned with. His stance was described as graceful when on the offensive. When on the attack, he struck with clean, elegant blows and with perfect form and technique. While no source confirms his chosen martial arts discipline, based on the characteristic grace with which he fought, he is generally thought to be a practitioner of Makashi, the second of the traditional lightsaber combat forms. Form 2 emphasized elegance, precision, refinement, and economy of motion. While the form lacked strength in its blows and was not suitable for power attacks or combating the strength-oriented martial arts, it was excellent for penetrating the defenses of others while also conserving energy. The preferred form for lightsaber dueling. While speculative, it does stand to reason that Farfalla would have specialized with Makashi, given the nature of the confrontations he was a part of. He lived during a time where regular altercations with the Sith could be expected by any member of the Order. And for a frontlines commander in the Army of Light, such engagements were guaranteed eventualities rather than mere possibilities. Farfalla participated in almost every battle waged on Ruusan, and fought alongside the legendary figures of his time, including General Hoth himself, as was the famed Ichani weapons master, Rasta Lisu. While he may not have been the equal of either, he was a decorated veteran of many of the same battles as they were, and apart from the final duel he took part in, Farfalla was never noted to have sustained a grievous injury, and was responsible for cutting down his fair share of Sith. Most notably, his dueling skills were sufficient to triumph over Lord Kopej, a fallen Jedi Master who was noted as one of the strongest members of the Brotherhood. While it's true that Kopej was battered and bloodied from the start of their duel, the Sith was noted to have put up a valiant effort despite his injuries. Farfalla's skills in battle were impressive. However, he was not without his limitations. During the Battle of Tython against Darth Bane and Zana, Farfalla's efforts as a duelist actually acted as a hindrance to Rasta Lisu at various points throughout the fight. This has caused some to view Farfalla with the same derision that many, including myself, carry for Jehun Athon, whose clumsy efforts against Zana were one of the primary reasons for the Sith victory. However, I for one give Farfalla more credit than that. When Rasta ordered Farfalla to stay out of her way, he heeded her without question and instead took up a supporting role as tactical overseer for the team. He used his insights and telekinetic force powers to defend Rasta and protect the Ithorian Jedi Waror, whose battle meditation bolstered the efforts of each Jedi participant. Additionally, when Rasta called attention to the curved hilt of Darth Bane's lightsaber, Farfalla was capable of immediately adjusting to the weapon, indicating a great understanding of alternative weaponry. He was nevertheless twice disarmed by the Dark Lord, though not because his technique was poor, but rather because Bane was capable of attacking with sheer, overwhelming force. Despite this, Darth Zana herself had been impressed by Farfalla and Rasta's efforts. In her view, to stand against the Orbalisk-empowered Darth Bane as long as the pair of Jedi had, would have required exceptional skill. At the end of the day, Farfalla was a duelist that I would liken to a figure such as Darth Traya, purely with regard to their function in battle. Clearly, they understood the fundamentals of the majority of the traditional martial arts, and both also seemed to possess a solid grasp of the various forms of alternative weaponry favored by members of the Jedi and Sith orders, likely a result of their long careers and years of service within a wartime environment. However, knowledge of the concepts involved does not always translate into true ability where the actual execution of the various maneuvers comes into play. Farfalla was a skilled duelist who knew his own limitations quite well, but this was made up for in part by his tactical insights and ability to coordinate a solid defense. This made him especially valuable when functioning as part of a group. While there was little he could do to combat an enemy with far greater strength, whether physical or with the Force, he did understand how and why battles played out as they did, as he was capable of reading, responding to, and even anticipating the actions of his adversaries. A valued military commander who studied warfare well before joining the Sith, Darth Nihl used a long-handled single-bladed lightsaber, and according to his entry in the Legacy-era campaign guide, he developed his own unique combat style. From what can be observed, it is my contention that Nyall was neither a committed acrobat nor overwhelmingly powerful. He blended his weapon's ability to marshal greater leverage and reach with speed and evasiveness. Though perhaps shorter in length than the traditional light pike, the spear-like weapon utilized by members of the Jedi and Sith Order, Nyall's design included a shaft composed of unknown material, which was far longer in length than the designs favored by beings such as Darth Plagueis or Kyle Katarn. Figures such as Darth Plagueis constructed slightly larger hilts than were common to suit their taller stature and greater physical size. This was done merely to keep things in proportion, whereas warriors such as the Jedi Master Kyle Katarn were thought to have employed similar designs in order to provide greater leverage for strength-oriented martial arts. Nyall's weapon had more in common with the traditional light pike, which utilized the same principles as the double-bladed lightsaber. As such, I am of the opinion that Nyall's personal style would have included the majority of the saber staff's advantages, while also being saddled with the weapon's weaknesses. The weapon could be used to impart more leverage behind power attacks, and could be used to defend efficiently against multiple opponents from a distance. However, the lack of a second blade made it no easier to deal damage against multiple adversaries. The shaft of Nyall's weapon was composed of unknown material, though it was thought by many to be made of either wood or yorick coral. It is possible that Nyall utilized a saber-resistant material in the construction of his weapon. However, this is pure speculation. Additionally, much like saber-staff wielders, Darth Nihl would have been forced to negate certain traditional maneuvers from his repertoire altogether, as some were made impossible because of the elongated shaft of the weapon's design. Alternating between attack patterns meant to keep his enemies at a distance and extreme close-quarters fighting employing physical grapples, punches, and kicks, Nyall was always on the attack. Perhaps because he understood that his chosen weapon, much like the light pike, did not transition well into close-quarters defense. This can all be observed from his use of hand-to-hand combat, his preference to jump or spin clear of oncoming attacks rather than meet them head-on, and his reliance on the element of surprise in order to defeat his opponents. His style was one that incorporated two bipolar focuses, and this all hinged upon the unusual weapon that he employed. The strange weapon and the combination of speed and greater reach made him a more difficult adversary to predict than most. He proved his skill in battle when he managed to literally and figuratively disarm the Zabrak Jedi Master Wolf Sazin, who was the original mentor of Cade Skywalker. Nyall was noted to have claimed the lives of several Jedi during the attack on Ossus, and while he never defeated Cade, he was ultimately capable of holding his own against the powerful young Jedi for a lengthy period of time. It appeared that Darth Nihl functioned at his best when he was able to surprise or off-balance his opponents with unusual tactics, but if he failed in that regard, then the contest quickly became far less one-sided in his favor. In my estimation, I would say he was at least to some extent reliant on his ability to surprise rather than legitimately overpower or outmaneuver his competition. He was a talented duelist, especially considering that he created his own style from the ground up. But the effectiveness of his approach has produced such inconsistent results. The conclusion I'm inclined to draw from all this is that Darth Nihil's custom fighting form lacked a clear direction or purpose in mind. And while this is my own speculation, I believe this ultimately left him in a position where he was constantly forced to improvise. A fighter like this cannot truly be defined by the accolades of his past, but rather by the measure of the opponent he is currently facing. So the question now is very simple. Is Darth Nihil's skill set sufficient to overcome Farfalla's? Ultimately, while Farfalla may not be anywhere near as skilled a master of Makashi as a figure like Count Dooku, he was still noted to be exceptionally skilled, and he does have years of experience applying his skills both in single combat and on the battlefield, just as can be said for Darth Nihl. More to the point, Farfalla applied these skills against large, dominating opponents like Lord Kopej and later Darth Bane, albeit unsuccessfully in the latter case. While Nihil's weapon may afford him greater levels of strength and power in his blows, the fact was he never exercised that component of his weapon during any of his duels, and considering his slight physique, that's hardly surprising. Despite his conformity to tradition and complete lack of innovation, I am inclined to view Farfalla as being the more viable martial artist of the two, at least when it comes to traditional lightsaber dueling, and the fact of the matter is, Farfalla simply has too much experience to be thrown off much by Nihil's strange weapon. Farfalla may not be any more powerful than Wolf Sazin, the first notable victim of Lord Nihil's. However, he is equipped with a form almost perfectly suited to combating what the Sith Lord is bringing to the table. If nothing else, Makashi likely endowed Farfalla with the one attribute that Darth Nihil's custom form lacked: focus. Valenthyne Farfalla gets the edge as a martial artist and lightsaber duelist. Valenthyne Farfalla, for all his pretensions and petty interests, was nevertheless a reasonably powerful Force user who applied his abilities the same way he applied his dueling skills, with good timing and precision. Apart from the basic force augmentation that all Jedi Masters were capable of drawing upon, Farfalla's force abilities appeared to be limited to different uses of telekinesis, notably force pushes, pulls, and barriers. Several times throughout the engagement on Tython, Farfalla used barriers and force blasts to great effect, targeting his opponent or else even his teammates to move them out of harm's way. His tactical uses of telekinetic shields and force pushes were as essential as Rasta's swordsmanship or Warwar's battle meditation. The most impressive use of Farfalla's power was when he encased the Orbalisk-empowered Darth Bane in a shimmering cocoon of light-side energy, long enough for the rest of the team to place themselves between the Sith and the Ithorian. Admittedly though, Farfalla required a brief period of time to gather his energies before unleashing the attack. Additionally, while he could use his powers to limit the damage imposed by Darth Bane's telekinetic waves, he was ultimately incapable of nullifying the impact of Sith lightning. At one point, he actually tried to shield himself from the Dark Lord's force lightning, but his efforts were met with failure as the Sith Lord ripped through his defenses. A powerful Force sensitive whose study of the Force was devoted to dark side teachings, Darth Nihl was a competent, though conventional student of the Sith arts. A skilled hunter and tracker, Nyall demonstrated the ability to tame a ferocious Tukata during his search for Darth Talon on Korriban. He was also known to have drawn upon his connection to the Force during his early years as a warlord on Nagi, an impressive accomplishment given his lack of any formalized training at the time. Darth Nihl also displayed the ability to utilize both offensive telekinesis as well as Sith lightning. However, both were very rarely employed by him. Despite this, he has used the Force to subdue, choke, and electrocute his opponents. More importantly, he has proven that the magnitude of his abilities is sufficient to fatally wound even members of the Skywalker lineage, Cole and Cade each having found themselves on the receiving end of his power. However, just as his fighting style was influenced by his ability to surprise his opponents, his two most prominent victims were only brought down because of the intervention of others, rather than by the sheer force of Nyl's powers. Cade Skywalker's focus had been diverted as he had just defeated Darth Talon in a duel before he found himself in Nyl's grip. And it took nearly half a dozen Sith to finish off Cole Skywalker, who had already beaten back Darth Nihl following the defeat of Wolf Sazin. Although I think Nyl's abilities were impressive, he was also perfectly willing to take the cheap shot, never failing to press his advantage against a distracted opponent. While both Skywalkers were brought down by his dark powers, I do not consider Nyall to be the equal of either Cade nor his father in terms of combat effectiveness, whether with the lightsaber or the Force. As I have already explained, Valenthyne Farfalla would at worst be able to defend against Darth Nihl where a contest of their dueling skills is concerned. Given the precision of Farfalla's form, and the fact that he is facing an opponent who carries a weapon ill-suited to close-quarters defense, it is probable that Farfalla would eventually outdo his competition as a swordsman. Realizing this, Darth Nihl would, in all likelihood, fall back on his Force abilities as a last resort. And so the question remains, are Darth Nyl's Force abilities enough to take down the Jedi Master? The truth of the matter is that we don't actually know the true limitations of Valenthyne Farfalla's abilities. Darth Bane was the only figure he was ever observed using his powers against for either offense or defense. Every other engagement he took part in only allowed us glimpses into his skill as a lightsaber duelist. And when he did use his powers, his most impressive displays came only after he had a moment to gather his energies. Something facilitated by the fact he was fighting as part of a group, and therefore had the focus drawn away from him at various points throughout the contest. This is something he would not be able to count on while facing Darth Nihl on his own, which limits the probability that Darth Nihl would have to contend with Farfalla's stasis field. When Farfalla did attack Darth Bane, he was facing a being with unnatural levels of power, as Bane's abilities were augmented by his symbiotic relationship with the Orbalisk armor. At one point throughout the fight, Farfalla even attempted to dissipate Bane's lightning by raising a force shield. While unsuccessful, the fact that he even attempted this rather than raise his lightsaber for defense does raise the question: was Farfalla normally capable of absorbing Sith lightning from beings who lacked Darth Bane's extreme depth in the Force, beings like Darth Nihl? Given that Farfalla lived during a time where engagements with the Sith were commonplace, it stands to reason that he may have experienced success in the past with this method, and that Darth Bane's freakish abilities were simply beyond him. Unfortunately, we don't really know the answer. Had Valenthyne Farfalla demonstrated himself to be skilled with Tumnus on any other occasion, I would feel obligated to award him the edge. However, he never did, and for this reason, I feel I must assume that such an advanced usage of the Force would be well beyond him. While I feel he would be able to put up a valiant effort during a pure lightsaber duel, in the end, Darth Nihl would overtake him using his greater versatility and specialization with lethal, dark Force powers to his advantage. For these reasons, I feel I must award Darth Nihl the edge as a Force wielder, and because this is the category that is most likely to determine the final outcome of this fight, I also name Darth Nihl the victor. Well, that's it guys. As always, this is all just my opinion, so I hope you don't get too bent out of shape if Valenthyne Farfalla happens to be your favorite Jedi. Though, if that description suits you, I really wasn't sure of your existence, so please don't hesitate to make your presence known. Hopefully all of you Darth Nihl fans will be pleased by his victory here, and hopefully you'll agree that despite the character's shortcomings, Farfalla himself was no softball of an opponent, making Darth Nihl's victory all the sweeter. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you on the next video. Until next time, may the Force be with you.